The apartment of the large family was noisy as usual. Cartoons were playing loudly in the hall, and 7-year-old Steve was watching them while eating oatmeal cookies with tea. At the same time, 5-year-old Anne and 3-year-old Wendy were screaming and howling as they tried to divide a doll between them, practically ripping its head off. Meanwhile, their mom, 30-year-old Mary, was vacuuming the bedroom and trying to clean up the mess. She didn't hear the key turn in the door and her mother-in-law enter. She was an elegant, respectable lady in a cashmere coat and a neat hat. She tried to shout to her daughter-in-law, but in vain. Then she simply unplugged the vacuum cleaner cord and stood in the doorway with a disgruntled look, arms folded across her chest. As a rule, this gesture did not bode well. The children, seeing their grandmother, did not rush to hug her. On the contrary, they hushed and froze. They disliked her and were afraid of her. When Mary saw her mother-in-law, she was startled, and in her heart she sneered, "Why did Peter give her the keys to the apartment? She comes here as if to work. Now she's going to start teaching me about life again. How annoying." But out loud the woman said, "Good afternoon, Claire. Are you visiting your grandchildren? You would have called. I would have prepared something delicious for your arrival. Come into the kitchen, I'll put the kettle on. Children, go and say hello to your grandmother." The children waved and continued to play, but stopped making noise just in case. Claire twirled the cup in her hands, squeamishly, and then it started. "God, Mary, the whole cup is sticky. It's disgusting. You've been home all day. Is it so hard to wash it? I mean, look at you. What's that look? A stretched-out tank top and tights, with a weird bundle on your head. You're a businessman's wife, after all. You have to be a lady at home. And then you're surprised Peter's been staying late at work. I didn't allow myself to appear in front of my husband in such a disgraceful way." Mary got up and sharply replied, "You, Peter, is your only son, and I have 3 children. You compare them too. I'm already like a squirrel in a wheel. I don't see the light of day. I don't even have time to look in the mirror sometimes. And your granddaughter drank compote from the cup. I'll wash it, don't worry. What are you here for anyway? To visit your grandchildren? Well, go for a walk with them, I don't mind. I'll finish cleaning and tidy up myself. I'd appreciate it." Claire pressed her lips together. "You're so good at welcoming your mother-in-law. You haven't even poured a cup of tea, and she's already chasing her out of the house. Oh, Mary, you should listen to my advice, or you'll be without a husband at this approach to the family. Who asked you to have 3 kids in the first place? And now you don't know what to do with them." Then my mother-in-law entered the hall and commanded, "My darlings, let's get ready. We are going for a walk with you, because your mother, you see, is very tired." The children began to gather reluctantly. Mary rushed to dress them, and mother-in-law did not lift a finger, only watched the process from the sidelines and grumbled, "No order. Steve, you're 7 years old and your mother is pulling your pantyhose on. Your father, when he was little, could do everything himself. That's the way I raised him." Mary couldn't take it anymore. "Yes, but then why can't he find his socks at 30 and throw them around the house?" The mother-in-law didn't give up. "It's not surprising in such a mess. Not only socks, you can't find anything. All right, Steve. Anne, Wendy, are you ready? Hold hands and let's go, and behave like proper children." The kids sighed and quietly walked out of the apartment. Mary waved them off, latched the door, and exhaled. Finally, the obnoxious mother-in-law was gone, at least for a little while. Her constant teasing and lecturing was unbearable. Mary drew a bucket of water, intending to wash the floors, and ran past the mirror and glanced at herself in passing. And suddenly she stopped and froze. Claire had a point. She had gotten herself all messed up. Big circles under her eyes, wrinkles on her forehead, and she had forgotten what makeup was. Maybe Peter had really cooled down because of that? The woman decided to herself, "That's it. I have to change, and make some time for myself, or I'll be alone." The mistress quickly finished with cleaning, took a bath with foam, applied a moisturizing mask to her face, and only relaxed, enjoying the warm water, as she heard howling and screaming in the hallway. My mother-in-law and grandchildren had already returned, and it had not even been an hour. What had happened? Mary forgot all about it, hastily wiped herself, and jumped out in her robe. It was a sight to behold. Steve was frowning, Anne was covered with something, and Wendy was roaring so loudly that it was ear-splitting. Water squelched from her shoes. Mary splashed her hands and began to undress the children and comfort her daughter. God, what happened? Wendy, did you fall? Does it hurt? Steve, how could you do that? What were you looking at? Claire started up and sawed like an old saw. These kids are unbearable. No sooner had they left the supermarket than Steve was jumping up and down like a madman, Anne was covered in chocolate, and Wendy managed to fall in a puddle. Disgraceful. It's giving me a headache. Well, I gotta go. Goodbye. Mary sighed. Thank you for going out. Have a good one. And again Mary forgot about herself and took care of the children, and the cold bathtub had to be drained. But it didn't matter. The woman laughed, hugged her grubby babies, and tickled them. She did not consider the children a burden at all, loved them with all her heart. Although it was hard, of course, one had to. She had a husband, but not much help from him. Peter had changed a lot lately. He came very late. He often smelled of alcohol and other women's perfume. He'd tell stories about corporate events and business meetings, and Mary pretended to believe it, even though she realized that her husband was lying. She herself had recently run a business and knew what business meetings were, how her life had changed in the last 6 years. It was like a reversal, but once it was very different. Mary's childhood was spent in the countryside. Her mother was an ordinary milkmaid, a very quiet, kind, and charitable woman. Her father died early when the daughter was only 6, so she and Mom lived alone. It was hard, not a word. They kept a vegetable garden, and the household. Mary had to watch the piglets and rabbits from a young age. We were tired as hell. Our legs were cramping. But otherwise it was impossible to live. I wanted to dress decently, not worse than others, and to collect for school. After all, Mary studied very well, went to the medal, and dreamed after graduation to go to the capital to enter the university. Her mother supported her. She did not want her daughter to repeat her fate, and lived in the village. There are no prospects, no normal work. Mary had a fiancé in the village. A guy, Sam, was courting her, singing songs to the guitar, sometimes carrying flowers. Said he loved her, promised her a golden mountain. But only he liked to drink with his friends, and when drunk became uncontrollable, could and heard a word, and humiliate in front of everyone. It really hurt Mary, and even frightened her. Her mother also worried about her daughter and advised her not to get involved with the bully Sam. Well, how to build a family with him, if he is now already drinking? Yes, debauchery. Young people often quarreled, then reconciled, then parted. In the end, Mary got tired of it all, and she left the groom, gave him a turn. And Sam held a grudge, especially when he learned that she was going to the capital. He shouted at the bus, "Who will need you there, you fool? There's a carload and a cartload of people like you there. Look, you'll have had enough of the capital's life. You'll come back, and I won't take you back, and don't expect me to." Pam waved her arms and scolded, "Come on, Sam, go home and don't cry. My Mary's gonna be fine. Don't embarrass us. The girl needs to study. She's got her whole life ahead of her." Mary entered the university, and all 5 years she studied hard. She did not even look at boys. She had a goal, and she went to it. There were no problems with work either. She was hired by a small but successful company as an economist. In 3 years she was able to make a good career and became deputy director of trade relations. Outwardly, Mary was a pretty, well-groomed girl. Many people in the company looked at her. But it so happened that she fell in love with Peter, an ordinary manager. He was considered mediocre. He did not have any special talents, did not show any zeal for work. But deep down, he wanted to live a beautiful, rich, and on the high road. He so persistently courted Mary, almost immediately offered her hand and heart, was gentle, passionate, anticipated all the desires of his beloved, and completely conquered the girl. And Mary's unexpected pregnancy decided everything. They had to urgently play the wedding. But only Peter's mother was not at all delighted with the choice of her only son. She considered her a village upstart, who purposely got pregnant in order to register in her 2-room apartment in the center of the capital. At first, Peter did not go to the mother. He was genuinely happy about the arrival of a son, fiddled with Steve, and was a model family man. He persuaded Mary to quit her job, on the condition that he would take her place in the company. The woman at first was adamantly opposed. "My dear, I value my work. So long to her went to it, and do not want to be a simple housewife. Son grows up, in the garden will go to the garden, and I will come out of maternity leave. But my husband said it so beautifully. Mary, I'm so dreaming of a large friendly family. I want a daughter. Why do you need this career? Is it a woman's happiness? I'd rather work and provide for my family, and you'll take care of your home. I can do it. I promise I won't let you down. Why should you burn out at work when you can enjoy motherhood? Well, you said yourself many times that a man should be a provider, support, so I want to become such for you and our family. While Mary was thinking about it, everything worked itself out again. She had not even had time to get out of maternity leave, but she got pregnant again, gave birth to Anne, and a year later to Wendy. There was no question of working now, although the director still trusted her to handle some company matters remotely. But it was Peter who took her place in the office. Soon his career was on the rise, but not because of his brilliant professional qualities. Girls from work often called Mary and complained that her husband is framing and denigrating employees, and himself every time to get out of it, even if he is guilty. The woman was indignant, tried to talk to her husband to conscience him, but he sharply replied, "This is my business, how to solve the working moments. The main thing is the result. The winners are not judged. Or do you envy me that I too was able to get into the people and become more successful than you? I think I'm trying for my family. What's wrong with that?" It was true that Peter began to earn decent money. They bought a good foreign car. The children were dressed to the hilt. The house was full. But there was another side to the coin. Not a pleasant one. Career rise and stray money so dizzy Peter's head that soon he felt like a king. He began to show his superiority at home, could raise his voice at Mary and the children, and was less and less often in the family. He took almost no interest in the interests and lives of the children, just the occasional superficial question to make a point. And he didn't like to deal with noisy fidgeters at all. He'd get a headache and demand quiet in the house. Mary was very offended by this. She heartily reprimanded her husband more than once. "Peter, you asked me to become a housewife, dreamed of a large family. And now what? I have to pull it all myself. You're either not at home or you don't have time to play with the kids. How do you not understand? They are also offended. They think that daddy does not love them." But the husband only got angry, irritated. In the family was brewing unhealthy atmosphere. Passions all heated up. Today was not an exception. Rather, it became the final point. It was almost midnight. The children were snoring in their cribs, having not waited for their father to come home, and Mary couldn't find a place to be. Peter's phone was switched off. She called her colleagues, and they answered in a surprised, sleepy voice that everyone had left the office as usual and did not know where her husband was. The woman was about to call morgues and hospitals, worried. What if something happened to the car or on the road? But finally the front door creaked, and the head of the family entered the apartment. Mary ran out into the hallway and turned on the light. Peter squinted unhappily and shouted, "Why are you looking at me like an investigator?" "Yeah, I'm late. I had a few drinks with Jack." "What? I'm not allowed?" The woman was taken aback by such insolence. "Late? Did you look at your watch? It's 1 a.m. I was about to call the morgue." "You're lying." "I called Jack. He's been asleep for hours." "Let me see your hand. Where's your wedding ring? Did you take it off on purpose? So you were with a woman?" She raised her hand and wanted to slap the insolent man, but Peter intercepted her and squeezed her hand until it was bruised. Mary even cried out. Tears came to her eyes from the pain. The husband suddenly became angry and insane, shouting at the whole apartment, "Just try to swing again, I'll punish you. I was with a woman, and for your information, I'm having an affair with her. She's young, she's beautiful, and she's a whirlwind in bed. And I'm sick of you, you shabby chicken. Look at what you've become like. A scarecrow is even prettier. Now you know everything, it's even better. Pack your things, take the little ones with you, and get out of here. This is my apartment. What are you looking at? Now!" Mary was sobbing. She couldn't believe what she was hearing, begging her husband to come to his senses. "What are you saying, Peter? Come to your senses. We have a family. We've been together for so many years. 3 children. Where am I going? It's nighttime. The kids are asleep. It's freezing outside. Let's calm down and talk about it tomorrow. You're drunk and you're talking nonsense." The woman wanted to run to the nursery, as Wendy and Anne had woken up from the screams of the adults and were crying loudly. But Peter went crazy. He ran around the house and threw the children's things right into the hallway, shouting, "Get out of my apartment! I'm sick of these children's cries. I can't stand it. Who asked you to give birth to 3? One would have been enough. No, just divorce, I insist. Now I'll have a new life instead of the same old routine." Mary was so scared for herself and the kids that she began to quickly dress them. Sleepy Steve could not understand anything. "Mommy, and why is Daddy so shouting? Where are we going? I want to sleep." The girls were crying too. Mary comforted them as best she could, though she herself was even more afraid. She had never seen her husband like that before, and she hoped that he would get over it, and in the morning he would call and apologize for this ridiculous wild scandal. She called a cab and went to Kenzie's friend, a co-worker, who thank God did not refuse to let her and her children sleep over, though she was surprised at their unexpected midnight visit. Mary put the children to bed and they fell asleep immediately, exhausted and crying. The women sat in the kitchen and talked quietly. Mary, too, finally gave vent to her feelings and emotions and sobbed inconsolably, trying not to wake the children. Her friend fussed, dripping sedative drops into her water, wailing, "Nah, drink it in one gulp. It'll make you feel better. What a bastard your Peter is. I'm not surprised, to be honest. Remember how we all tried to talk you out of having an affair with him? We've known him for a long time. He's a black soul, a corrupt one. If necessary, he'll go head over heels. He won't stop for anyone. But to throw his wife and children out of the house in the middle of the night, that's beyond the bounds." Mary was also indignant. "Nothing. He'll sleep it off. He'll realize in the morning what he's done, and he'll ask for forgiveness. He frightened the children to death." I could barely calm Anne down. She was crying to the point of hiccups. "I don't believe this is the end. It can't be. Peter was not like that. He loves me. It's just a crisis, small children, everyday life. So he went crazy. They, men, are weak, not like us women. He, of course, told me drunkenly about his mistress, but I don't believe it. He was just scaring me." Kenzie shook her head, comforted her friend, and then said carefully, "No, Mary, he didn't. We noticed long ago that he was going to the side from you, often ordered flowers for someone. Once he got tickets to a concert. And in the smoking room he bragged about an expensive ring. Gold, by the way. A woman's ring. If you haven't seen all this, you can draw your own conclusions. I'll find out everything, I promise you. You can't hide a thing in a bag for long, and your Peter likes to boast. I hope to God I'm wrong. I feel sorry for you, Mary. How will you be alone with 3? The mother of many children that night almost did not sleep, did not let the phone out of her hands, but the next day Peter still did not call, and when she decided to call him, just dropped her calls. In a panic, she dialed her mother-in-law, thinking that maybe she could talk some sense into her son. Although knowing her attitude towards her, she realized that there was little hope. Claire answered the phone at once. Mary was happy and began to cry. "Hello, Claire. Do you know what Peter has done? He kicked me and the kids out of the house at night. Your grandchildren were crying so hard they were scared, and now he's not answering his cell phone. Claire, I don't understand what's going on. Why don't you talk to your son? We're a family. Does he really want a divorce?" My mother-in-law just laughed and said, "And I warned you that you would lose your husband. You've had enough, my dear. It's all your fault, you village idiot. You didn't save the family." Poor Peter. He couldn't rest in his own apartment. He slept at his mom's sometimes. "What do you want from me now? My son has another woman and he's going to propose to her. That's the way it is. Don't call here again and don't pity me. I can't help it." Mary couldn't bear it. This betrayal of her husband and mother-in-law couldn't fit in her head. How can you do this? What have I done to you? If it hadn't been for me, Peter would never have made head of the department. I love him so much I've devoted myself to my family, and you're blaming me for the kids. Damn you and your son, you and your scoundrel son, you'll burn in hell. I won't bother you anymore. The woman threw down the phone and burst into tears again. Her family was scattered like a deck of cards. Everything was mixed up. Her life was in despair, and she did not know what to do. The children immediately ran up to her and began to hug her. "Mommy, don't cry, please. Is Daddy fighting again?" "Yes." "Why is he like that?" "We're going home now, aren't we?" Mary understood that children should not be frightened, no matter how nauseating. She wiped her tears, smiled forcefully, and answered, No, my sunshine. We are not going home. We will go to grandmother in the village. There the cat Muska misses you, and the cow. Do you miss your grandmother? The children immediately cheered up and cheered, Yay! Grandma Pam is the best and kindest, and we always miss her. She never scolds us. And she makes delicious raspberry pies. Kenzie asked worriedly and quietly, Is it really that bad? Are you really going to go to your mom's house in the country? For good? How could it be? Mary answered firmly, Yes, Kenzie, for good. My mother-in-law, instead of sympathizing with me, threw mud at me, and let them all go to hell, the ugly family. We'll survive. I'm used to hardship. So, goodbye, sweetheart. Thank you for sheltering us. Call, write, don't disappear. The best friends hugged, cried. Kenzie ran to the bedroom for a minute and brought a small package to Mary. There's not much here, it's my personal stash I was saving up for a new coat. But you need it more now. You have to start your life from scratch. You'll need it. You don't have to give it back, it's from the heart. Mary hugged Kenzie again and thanked her. Thank you, you've helped us so much. I was too embarrassed to ask, because Peter was driving me so hard last night. I didn't have time to get anything together. I've got some on my card and in my purse, but not much. I hope at least my mother will accept me and not judge me, because I have nowhere to go but home. Almost the whole day they traveled home with their children by train to their native Ryabanovka. On the heart was so heavy, ahead of the longing, the unknown, and on the shoulders of a huge responsibility for their 3 babies. How to endure everything and not to break down. Mary tried not to cry in front of the children, but the lump stood in her throat, and the tears themselves treacherously dripped from her eyes. The weather was terrible, pouring rain, dog cold. The small village house was warm and cozy. Firewood crackled in the stove, the smell of homemade baked bread. Pam sat in an old armchair in front of the TV and knitted a bright multicolored scarf for her granddaughter. She was so sad and anxious, with no one to talk to. Only the cat was lying on her knees, curled up in a ball and purred affectionately. Suddenly Polkan barked in the yard, and then began to whine joyfully, as if he smelled someone of his own. There was a knock at the window, and the surprised woman looked out and gasped. Her daughter and grandchildren were stomping around the gate, all wet to the skin and with a suitcase in their hands. Pam immediately jumped out, opened the door, and let everyone into the warm house began to lament. Daughter Mary, why didn't you even warn me? I would have asked my neighbor Savelich to meet you by car. Oh, my poor little ones, my favorite grandchildren have arrived. They're soaked to the skin. Quickly change into dry clothes or you'll get sick. Mary didn't know how to tell her mother about her divorce and her husband's betrayal, so she only answered, We're not visiting, Mammy. We're here for good. We've come to live. You won't send us away? I have nowhere else to go. Pam even dropped Wendy's shoe from her hands, looked intently at her daughter and saw her eyes full of tears and inexpressible grief, and did not pry into her soul with inquiries and answered cheerfully, What are you talking about, Mary? This is your house too. Live as long as you need. I'll be only glad. Do you know how sick I am here alone? It'll be more fun now with my grandchildren. You're my good ones, and you've grown so much. Steve has grown so big. Oh, how I've missed you. I'll set the table quickly. I have pumpkin porridge in the oven. We'll have dinner. The children ate their grandmother's porridge, drank tea with raspberry jam, told their favorite grandmother all the news, caressed her. Pam laid out the 2-bed sofa and made a bed for the children, and they immediately fell asleep under the downy blanket, snoring sweetly. Mary, meanwhile, washed the dishes and wiped them dry, and she had a lump in her throat, feeling guilty for some reason, and did not know how to tell her mother. The wise woman quietly approached her daughter, put her arm around her shoulders and whispered, You can say nothing to me if it is hard. I see that you have some trouble. Come to me, my dear girl. Just cry, and I'll take pity on you, as I once did in childhood, and you'll see it will be easier. Mary couldn't stand it and cried. It was so good and cozy in her mother's arms. She would not send her away, would not condemn her, always understood and forgave her. The woman sobbed, Mommy, I feel so bad. I am so guilty. I could not keep the family. Betrayed me, Peter, took a mistress, and threw us and the kids out in the middle of the night. I still can't get over it. I loved him so much. I did everything for him. And Mary told her mommy everything, about her mother-in-law, who humiliated her all the time, and about her scoundrel husband, and she really felt better when she cried on her mother's shoulder. Pam comforted her. "You're not to blame, honey. You've got nothing to blame yourself for. Come on, don't tear up your soul. When your daddy died, you were just a baby, like Steve is now. I didn't think I'd make it. I couldn't lift you on my own. I was so scared. But we got through it. You're a beautiful girl. And now we'll manage. You're not alone. I'm here to help and support you. We have a vegetable garden, a farm, milk and sour cream of our own. We'll live. Go to the chairman. Maybe he'll find you a job. And I'll look after the grandchildren. It's my pleasure. Everything will get better gradually. The walls help at home. Don't curse Peter and your mother-in-law, don't. You'll bring trouble on yourself. Let them live as they know how. We don't care about them now. Life is like a boomerang, and they'll be repaid for their sins, you'll see. I'll pray every night for things to get better. All right, daughter, you go to bed now. I'll give you my special herbal drops. You'll fall asleep in no time. You'll be asleep in the morning." Mary hugged her mother tightly again and whispered, "Thank you, Mommy, for everything. For your kindness, your understanding. You're the best. I love you so much." So they began to live together, and at first it was difficult, unusual. After all, it was a village, the amenities outside, firewood, stove. But Mary quickly got involved and remembered how to do what to do. The chairman helped her and got her a job as an accountant in the office. The salary, of course, was not God knows what, but in her situation it was a salvation. The children liked it here very much. They helped their grandmother, fed the chicks, funny-eared rabbits, ran around at will. At first, of course, often asked about Daddy, bored, but the further they went, the less often. So 6 months passed unnoticed. For all that time, Peter never called once, never asked about the children. Apparently he had completely cut his family out of his life. Mary also decided for herself that she would raise the children alone and would not even file for alimony. She could manage on her own. After such a betrayal of her husband, she did not look at men, finally disbelieved in them. Though her ex-fiancé came by a couple times, he laughed at her or offered to go out with her again. And once Sam watched over the fence as Mary hung a mountain of baby laundry on the ropes and snickered. "Well, Mary, have you had enough of the capital city life? You come home, and with 3 kids on your neck, and you thought all the city princes turned out to be a jerk? I warned you. Now I'm not chasing you, but you'll be chasing me. Nobody needs you with such a triple trailer." Mary silently turned around, went to the gate, opened it sharply, and poured water from the bucket right into Sam's face and said angrily, "Are you done? Then don't come here. I'm not going to chase anyone. I'll deal with my trailer myself. Get out of here, and don't come here again." The man didn't expect such a turn, wiped his face and shouted, "Fuck you. You're just as small-minded as you were. You'll come running back wherever you go. It's hard in the village without a man. I'll think about whether to take you in or not." Mary called Kenzie sometimes, telling her the news that Peter had indeed brought a mistress to their apartment. Her name was Sally, and she was pregnant. Kenzie would gibber, "You should see her. How beautiful is she? She looks like a yaga. Where did he find her? He found someone to trade you for. She's got a nice figure, but that's all she's got. She's a waitress at the cafe across the street from our company, and that's where he picked her up." Mary replied tiredly, "God be with them. Let them live as they please. It's all in the past. I don't have time to think about Peter now. I've got a lot on my mind. My mom and I got broiler chickens, so we'll feed them, sell the carcasses in the fall and dress up the kids. Steve needs to buy so much stuff for school. And you come visit us in the summer. We'll go swimming at the river." Though Mary braved her friend's presence as if she didn't care, it was far from so. In her soul was raging hurricane. She resented. "What a bastard. He traded me for some ugly chick. So her child will be raised by him, and his own, like kittens out of the house throughout." One day during a family dinner, Mary's cell phone rang. The number was completely unfamiliar. On the other end of the line, she heard a thin, squeaky voice. "Allo, you're Mary, right? Please don't hang up. I don't have anyone else to call," Mary asked in surprise. "Girl, who are you and what do you want?" She sighed heavily and continued, "I'm Sally. Sally, Peter and I don't even know how to say it. I gave birth to his son, Mike, and he left us. He doesn't pick up the phone. All he wrote in his text was that he'd had enough of babies screaming in diapers, and he didn't want to live like this anymore. I'm an orphan with nowhere to go. I don't know why I'm calling you. I guess I just want to apologize to you. You see, I didn't know until the last minute that Peter was married and had 3 kids, I swear. He always hid the ring. I didn't mean to ruin your family. I didn't mean to. Mary got so angry she screamed, "You didn't do what on purpose? Sleeping with a married man and getting him pregnant? I hate you, do you hear me? You ruined my life. You left my kids without a father, so it's your ass. Now you're a loner like me." The woman hung up the phone and burst into tears. Her mother looked at her perplexed. Mary told the whole conversation, and at the end she added, "That's what she should do, she'll call me again. It's too late to repent. Let her dance now, poor orphan, alone and with a baby." Pam shook her head and began to conscience her daughter. "Mary, listen to me. You're jealous now. You're angry with Peter, and I understand you. But think about it. What's that got to do with Sally? If it wasn't her, it would have been someone else. It's not just about her. If Peter was a decent man, he wouldn't have left you or Sally so easily. He doesn't love anyone but himself, and he doesn't want children, even though they're all his own. If a man truly loves a woman, he won't even look at anyone else. I'm not on his mistress's side, mind you, and I don't condone her at all. What would you do if you were in a difficult situation without your home, without me? Would you do it alone? Think about it. Personally, I even feel sorry for this poor, deceived woman. I mean, her baby is your kid's paternal brother. I think she's desperate enough to call you, knowing full well you must hate her." Mary lay awake all night, turning from side to side, looking at her babies snoozing sweetly under her nose. Their home is warm, cozy, and safe. But where would Sally go from the hospital? If you think about it, her situation is really a dead end. You can't get a job with a baby, and you can't afford to rent a corner. She can't go to the pier, can she? Peter's a bastard, I can't tell you. In the morning, Mary came to her mother in the kitchen and took her hands and said firmly, "You're right, Mommy. You're right as always. Let everyone in the village call me a complete fool, I don't care. Why don't we take Sally and the baby home with us? Just for a while. I mean, her baby's a relative of ours too. I can't just spit on her and forget about her." Pam hugged her daughter and said, "I'm glad you've made this decision. Go into town and bring her here. We have Wendy's discharge envelope, which you brought to me once so it wouldn't get dusty in the apartment, and a lot of baby stuff. Good thing we didn't get the pink one, just the white one. It won't cost us a bowl of soup and a glass of milk for the baby. I'll look after the grandchildren, don't worry. I'll clean up the little bedroom in the back, and we'll put her in there." Mary drove to the maternity hospital, worrying all the way. How would their meeting go? What was she like, her husband's mistress and separator? Would she even be able to forgive and accept her in her heart? What if Sally had already checked out? Where would she be? At the emergency room, when Mary explained that she was looking for Sally, they were even happy. "At last you are her relative? At least someone came to visit the poor woman in labor. It's been 3 days since we were supposed to discharge her, and she's crying and stalling, saying she has nowhere to go." What kind of young people are these days? They have a baby with no one, and then they don't know what to do. 3rd floor, 5th ward. Put on a shoe and a robe and you can go in. "Are you going to pick her up or what?" Mary said confidently. "I will. Here's everything for the baby. Get the discharge papers ready." Mary was very worried. A storm of emotions was raging in her soul. Anger, pity, jealousy. She exhaled and opened the door to the room. On the bed sat a very young, stubby girl. Very delicate and pretty, and so sad. Not at all like a treacherous seductress and separator. Eyes wet, a baby in her arms. She cradles him, whispering something. The woman entered the room. Sally immediately jumped up, clutched the baby tightly to her and babbled, "Hello? You're Mary, aren't you? How did you find me? Don't hurt me, please. I didn't mean to hurt you, I swear. I didn't know Peter was married. He always took his ring off. Peter left me too. He never took me away from here. I'm desperate. I don't know what to do. You must hate me. You've come to laugh at my misfortune? I realize I deserve all this, I guess, but I just loved—" Sally wept bitterly and put the baby in the crib and covered her face with her hands. Mary silently walked over to the baby, looking at him intently. He looked so much like Steve, the same blue open eyes, button nose and plump lips. So pretty, and so defenseless. Mary sat down on a chair beside Sally and said firmly, "I didn't come here to beat you, Sally, and I didn't come here to mock you. I'm here to help you, you fool. I've got everything I need for the baby. You're being discharged. You can stay at my house for a while. There's no reason to wander. Your son is not a stranger to us. He's my children's paternal brother too. And I'm no better than you. I'm just as stupid and naive as you are for falling in love with that bastard. It's not the time to get into a fight, don't worry. No one will hurt you." Sally couldn't believe what was happening, and looked at Mary with such gratitude. "Thank you so much. You're saving me right now. I was on the verge of despair, with nowhere to go. Don't think I'm a hard worker. I'll help around the house, and Mike is quiet. Calm. He won't be a nuisance at all. You're a saintly woman, Mary. I'm sorry for everything." Mary took Sally and the baby and took them to the village. At first, the neighbors and fellow villagers turned their fingers when they found out who the mother and daughter had taken in. It is such a wildness to shelter a mistress with her fattened child. But time passed, and gradually the passion subsided. Everyone got used to it and stopped talking. Pam took Sally well. Not a word, not a hint did not offend, even pity the orphan in a feminine way. The children also liked the kind and quiet girl. They were happy to take care of Mike. They lived as one big and friendly family. Together they worked the vegetable garden and looked after the household. Mary at first treated Sally cool and wary. All looked at the separation. But every day more and more convinced that the naive girl just foolishly fell into the clutches of Peter, believed him. One day they had a heart-to-heart talk while picking blueberries in the woods. Sally said, "I've been an orphan as long as I can remember, living in an orphanage. I've never known the warmth of home, never understood what it was like to live in a family. However, one teacher loved me very much, even took me home with her sometimes. I was so jealous of her children, and I did not understand why they were capricious or resentful of their parents. After all, they are so happy. They have a home, a father and a mother. They are loved and protected. Lara even wanted to take guardianship over me, but my relatives were against it, and she did not dare. But she helped me until her death. I am so grateful to her, at least for those rare moments of warmth and affection that she gave me. She helped me to get an apartment as an orphan. She got me a job as a waitress in a cafe. I was so happy. Life was getting better. And then I met Peter. He so beautifully courted, took me to the movies and concerts, said that he was divorced, that his ex was a slob and inept, a slutty woman, so he divorced. And I was a fool to believe it all. You see, I loved him so much it was like I was under hypnosis, catching every word he said, obeying him in everything. One day Peter came in so sad and grief-stricken I was worried. I asked him what was wrong, and he said that he had big problems at work, that he had someone else's debt and could go to jail. So I stupidly volunteered to help. I myself do not know how he persuaded me to sell my apartment, promised that we move to live in his 2-bedroom in the center, and he would then give me everything to the penny. And I believed again. We did move into Peter's apartment. Claire was so nice to me, so courteous. But everything changed the second I realized I was pregnant. My fiancé was like a substitute. He went into a rage, shouted at me that he was fed up with screaming children and sent me for an abortion. And I couldn't do it, you know? I couldn't kill the baby. I really wanted it. I thought Peter would come to his senses, so I foolishly told Claire, but she took it badly, screaming that I was just another slut who wanted her apartment. That's when I found out that Peter was still married, that he had 3 small children, and that he had kicked them all out. It was the same fate for me. I barely carried the baby to 8 months, all the time scandals and quarrels, and I was put on conservation. And that was the end of the story. Peter called himself and said that he was leaving me and that I would not come back to him. I cried, begged him to come to his senses, asked him to at least give me the money he took from the sale of my apartment. He only laughed and hung up the phone, saying in farewell that he had never seen such fools as me. So I spent a month in labor and gave birth, and he never took me away. I know that it's all my own fault, that I'm a fool, and it makes it even harder and prouder. But I loved him so much. He was my first man, the meaning of my life. I thought we would get married and have a family. I dreamed of it. But now I'm sure I'll have nothing. Sally couldn't stand it any longer and cried again. Mary was no longer angry with her either, she said quietly. Well, that's enough crying. We're both fools. But what's the use of grieving? Nothing. Everything will get better slowly. My mom and I and the kids won't leave you, and together it's more fun. I keep thinking, at what point in time did Peter become such a soulless monster? Or was he always like that? And I, all these years that I lived with him too, did not notice anything. How can it be? Having 4 siblings and not caring about them all at once. You know, at first I didn't want to file for alimony, I was proud. But then I changed my mind. At least let him pay something to his own kids. You do it. Let's look at everything positively. You and I have the most important thing, our children. I look at them and realize that's the meaning of life, and Peter has no one. He's not so young anymore. Soon women will stop hanging on his neck, and mommy's not getting any younger. What will he be left with? You and I have to get on with our lives, work, raise our kids. My Steve's all grown up now, trying to help me with everything, looking after his sisters. He's growing up to be a real man. And your Mike will be an adult soon. He'll be your support and backbone. And Peter will still be biting his elbows, you'll see. It'll be too late. It was a warm July evening. Mary and Sally went to the river with the kids. The kids splashed in the warm water. They could hardly get them out. On the way home, Mary's cell phone rang. She almost dropped it when she saw the name of the caller on the screen. It was her ex-mother-in-law, Claire. Mary's heart immediately sank and went into a frenzy as she remembered the unpleasant memories of dealing with her taunts and shenanigans, and her nasty laugh. The woman picked up the phone and answered unhappily, even sharply. What do you want this time? I think you have achieved your goal, and now we are strangers to each other. Claire began the conversation in a broken voice. Good afternoon, Mary. I know I'm very guilty before you. I've done a lot of evil to you, and I probably don't have the right to ask for anything right now. Mary answered irritably, I'm not interested in all this. Have a nice day. She was about to hang up, but Claire shouted, Mary, please don't hang up. Listen to me, please. I have a serious illness. I'm in the final stages. As it happens, I can barely get out of bed anymore. I don't have long to suffer. The doctors say a couple of months at the most. And Peter, when he heard about it, he went abroad and is living there, having fun. He doesn't need his mother anymore. I don't need anything. I ask only one thing. Please bring my grandchildren to say goodbye. I want to ask their forgiveness for everything, to ease my soul, to see them one last time. I am so guilty before you, my relatives. I am sorry. Mary replied in a daze. All right, Claire. We'll be there tomorrow. Wait for us. She told Sally and her mother, and the family council decided that now was not the time to get into a fight and take offense. The man was dying, and he needed help, something to ease his suffering. The next day, Mary went to her mother-in-law's house with the kids. On the way, she told them, Grandma Claire is very sick. We must help her. She wants to see you. You're her grandchildren. I know you don't like her very much, but please stay with her for a while. It will be easier for her. The children nodded. They were used to obeying their mother in everything, though they didn't want to go to their grandmother, who was always displeased with them. On the way, Mary bought apples, oranges, candy, something to please the sick woman. She had expected her mother-in-law to look bad, for illness was not a colorful thing. But when she opened the door, Mary was stunned. 3 years ago, Claire had been a well-groomed, mannered woman, and now she was facing Kashi the immortal, skin and bones, eyes sunken in, and her face covered with deep wrinkles. The children, too, were shocked and even frightened, huddled close to their mother and kept silent. Claire was so happy she immediately wailed, Mary, my granddaughters, hello, my darlings. Thank you for coming. Come on in. I haven't cleaned up for a long time. I'm exhausted. I can barely get out of bed. How do you live? Tell me. Grandma's interested in everything. Steve, you've grown so much. You're all grown up now and you've got a tan. Mary pulled herself together and commanded, So, children, now we'll set the table and we'll drink tea. You talk to your grandmother, show your drawings and crafts, and I'll do it myself. The children recovered a little from the shock and took out their creations from their backpacks, began to show them all at once, and Claire listened to them so attentively, catching every word and smiling benignly. Mary tidied up the apartment, ran to the store. The refrigerator was full of food, cooked a boiling soup, boiled tea, and called everyone to the table. Even the sick mother-in-law ate with appetite and said, "Oh, how delicious. Thank you, Mary, for everything. I'm all alone with no one to give me a glass of water. It's so scary to die. You lie there for 24 hours looking only at the ceiling, going over your life and your memory, and your sins are suffocating you, preventing you from breathing. I always thought your marriage to my son was a terrible mistake, and I tried with all my might to break you up. I thought my Peter was worthy of a better wife, and I was jealous of you. Even the grandchildren annoyed me, I confess. When he brought Sally to the apartment after your breakup, I was even glad that now there are no children. My son will sleep well, rest more. But my second fiancée got pregnant almost immediately, and I was furious. Peter did a disgusting thing to her, and I was on his side again, justifying my son. We never got her out of the hospital. I don't know what happened to her and my grandson, and I really want to find her too, to repent at least before I die. I guess my blind maternal love only spoiled everything, broke everyone's life. And then Peter went off the rails. He started going out, never came home. We often fought with him, and he blames me for everything, they say. I do not let him since childhood to breathe and live. And 6 months ago, I suddenly fell ill. Out of the blue, my leg swelled up. I started limping. I went to the doctors. I thought it was a joint problem, but it turned out to be metastasis, and I'm terminally ill. I told my son, waiting for Peter's support and attention, but he only grinned and said, "Well, you have outlived your time, Mother, and I'll tell you right away I'm not going to sit by your bedside without a word. I'm sorry, I can't. You hang in there. I'll visit you." And he never came. Can you believe it? Only then I realized what a monster I'd raised myself. Always giving Peter everything on a platter, never saying no to anything, lording it over us. And this is the result. He doesn't need his own mother at all. I'll die on this bed and no one will remember. It hurts so much. I lived my whole life only for my son, breathed for him, and now nobody needs me. I am very guilty before you, Sally, and my grandchildren. I am ashamed that I did that. I let my son destroy my family and even helped him in this. I treated my grandchildren coolly, and now I'm biting my elbows. Forgive me if you can, and help me find Sally. I don't have the energy or the time. My days are numbered. I must apologize to her too and see my grandson at least once. Otherwise, what kind of a grandmother am I? I don't want to go to the other world with such a burden on my soul. Mary listened to her and couldn't believe it. Had Peter stooped so low, abandoning his dying mother? It was out of line. She took Claire's dry hand in hers and answered honestly, "I forgive you. Of course you can't go back to the past. You've cried a lot of tears, but what can you do? I won't leave you, my grandchildren, and I will visit you and help you. I'm sorry about what happened, and I'll bring Sally next time. I took her out of the hospital with Mike. She's at my house in the country. So you'll get to see the youngest grandchild. He's so funny. He looks just like Peter, and he looks just like my Steve. He's his father's brother after all." Claire cried. She whispered, "You're extraordinary, Mary. I've never met anyone so kind and helpful before. Thank you for your kind heart that doesn't know how to hate." Mary was close to Claire until her last breath. She and Sally helped her, visited her. The old lady, at least before her death, was with her grandchildren, had fun, and went to the other world with a light heart. Mary, after her death, overcame herself and called Peter, shouted into the phone in a voice that was not her own, "Peter, come here at once. Your mother is dead. Funerals need to deal with. Say goodbye to her at least." But the half-drunk voice replied, "Oh, what people nowadays worry. And I can't. I'm abroad. I have an important contract here. Don't call me anymore. I'm busy. I can't help her anymore." Mary buried Claire properly, ordered a wake in a cafe and a church service, and now she was even glad that she and Peter were divorced. No wonder he was annoyed with his own children if he hadn't even come to bury his mother. No, with such a callous and soulless egoist should not be associated with his life. From him will not expect sympathy or help, no matter what happened. 3 more months passed, and suddenly a notary came to Mary's village. He announced a will that shocked everyone. The apartment where she and Peter lived, Claire bequeathed to her grandchildren Steve, Wendy, and Anne. And the apartment she'd lived in herself to little Mike. And Peter was left with nothing. He had nothing of his own, as it turned out. Naked as a falcon. Pam was crying her eyes out and crying her head off. My sister-in-law, she's a real piece of work. I didn't expect that from her. All the same, it seemed sincere repentance and decided at least after death to take care of the grandchildren of the wrong son. Well done. Peter, having learned about it, rushed to his native land, made an ugly scandal and shouted that he would not give up his living space for nothing, pouring dirt on Mary and Sally, and called his mother a crazy old woman. Mary had to get help from a lawyer. She accidentally saw an ad for his services on the internet and called and made an appointment for a consultation. It turned out to be a pleasant man in his 40s, with kind, a little sad eyes. When he heard the whole story of the client, he aghast and replied, "You know, I have for many years of practice a lot of children led, what I have not seen, but this is the first time I hear. You're an amazing woman, Mary. To give a helping hand first to her husband's mistress, to shelter her, and then to a sick mother-in-law who has been oppressing you all your life. Not many people are capable of such a thing. I will definitely help you get a legal inheritance. I'll take your case." In the process, Mary became very close and friendly with John. He gradually told her about himself. He was a widower. He had no children. But he wanted so much. He lived only by his work. Between them immediately arose sympathy, and then friendship. John began to visit Mary in the village, got acquainted with her mother and children. They immediately reached out to him. After all, they lacked a man's upbringing. A daddy is a daddy. And when John brilliantly won the case and Peter was evicted, Mary and him moved into the very apartment where she lived with her ex-husband. It was getting closer to the wedding. Their new family was very different, fun and friendly. John found at least an hour of time every day, no matter how tired he was, to spend with the children. He listened to each of them, played with them, helped Steve with his lessons. He wasn't annoyed by noisy girls. On the contrary, he could have a pillow fight or a merry chase with them. Mary couldn't be happy. How could her own father spit on the children and threw them out? And John loves them so sincerely, takes care of them. It's worth a lot. She was thankful that their paths had parted forever. Otherwise, she would never have met her true love. Now she understood what it was to be behind a husband, to feel like she was behind a wall of stone. She returned to her old job. She was welcomed there, and her life was back on track, with all the sorrows behind her. Things went well for Sally, too. She got a job with a farmer, Steve. She didn't want to be a burden and sit on Pam and Mary's neck. It just so happened that Steve liked the woman very much. Quiet, modest, hard-working. And the baby was not a hindrance. The farmer was childless and was happy to take care of Mike. 6 months later, the couple began to live together, and then signed. Sally refused to go to the city. She was alien to its bustle, nervousness of people. She was not comfortable there. But she liked the country life very much. Now she and Steve raised a huge household, worked until the 7th sweat, raised a son and were happy. Just happiness. It's different for everyone. Peter's fate was unenviable. He cucurolesil a few more years on the money once set aside, grew old, became useless. The company was in crisis, and he was laid off. And one day, once again drunk with grief, he got behind the wheel and made a massive accident, after which he was left disabled and lived out his days in a hospice. No one visited him. He sat for days and looked at the black dot on the wall, angry at the whole world, cursed his mother and his women and children, and never realized that he himself with his own hands destroyed everything, that it was all his own fault. Now the whole family came to visit Pam for the summer. In the gazebo, under a huge apple tree, they set the table, fried kebabs, drank her grandmother's delicious cherry naleuca, and talked about life, shared the news. Pam loved these soulful meetings so much, smiled blissfully, wrapped in a shawl, and admired her grandchildren, rejoiced for her daughter, for Sally, because she had also become her family long ago, and said in the old man's way, "Now I am calm, now everything is fine, now I can die." Suddenly the son-in-law stood up, raised a shot glass and said a toast. "You're going to die too soon, Mom. Who's going to take care of another grandchild? Mary and I are expecting a baby. You can congratulate us." Pam fluttered her arms, babbling. "A daughter? Really? Oh, what a joy. You're so good." Everyone laughed and congratulated Mary and John, and the children shouted, "Hooray! We're going to have a baby brother." Mary hugged her husband and asked, Oh, I don't know. I'm a little scared, to be honest. Will I be able to cope with a whole soccer team? I mean, I'm old now, it's going to be hard. John kissed her and answered firmly, You can't, but we can. We are together. I'm with you and I will never betray you. All our children are my family, remember, and I will love them equally. We're a family, and we'll raise another human being. Do you believe me? And Mary believed. She knew John wouldn't betray her, and that's probably the most important quality in a man.